All right, welcome back to the Sort of Sports Podcast, episode number 7. And as I said before, I think it's just kind of the thing to open it up with all right nowadays. I just think that's the way we're going, and all right, let's get into it. Well, it feels like there's really only one real way to start, and that's to talk about probably the biggest professional sports event, or maybe just sports event in general. I think really the only thing that has a chance to match it's March Madness, but March Madness is like a whole 3 weeks of events. This is probably the biggest sports event in the world, and that's other than the Olympics and or World Cup. I'm getting way off a tangent. It's the Super Bowl, and we all know what I thought. A whole season I had the Chiefs winning. I think Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, and he played like it all season. And I was 100% sure that he was going to get it done and go back to back. And then Tom Brady decided that he was going to make sure we all still knew that he's the greatest of all time. So, yikes. Yeah, I mean, I'll eat my humble pie. I've been humbled. Um, Really, what really impressed me about the Buccaneers game, though, was their defense. I thought that against the Saints. I really thought that against the Packers. And then this was the game where I was just like, yeah, that defense. It wasn't like they were ranked in the top 5 during the season, but it really showed. It really showed during the Super Bowl. I mean, the Chiefs didn't even score a touchdown. I saw a meme. Somebody said a fan ran across the field, of course, and he found the end zone before Patrick Mahomes did, and that brought me pain. But I will admit, it was a pretty good joke. Yeah, that defense was crazy. Mahomes was sacked only 3 times, but he had 2 interceptions. Granted, one of those interceptions was one of those where it's like a tip. It was tipped, and then it was just caught out of the air. So it wasn't like, well, I guess let's just, you know what, we're going to move over real quick to the quarterback battle. Because this is obviously the two of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen, ever, I think. I think Mahomes, this is a big dampener on his legacy. It's going to be really hard for him to become the greatest of all time because of this. I mean, 7-1 is really hard to get over. 6-2 isn't, but 7-1 is. I do think Mahomes still has a chance, but he'd pretty much have to three-peat at some point. But we'll get into that later. We'll talk more about the Chiefs' future. Let's start off with Mahomes, who obviously lost the game, 31-9. 26 completions, 49 attempts, so just a little slightly over 50. 270 yards, 2 interceptions, 3 sacks. Passer rating. Yeah, this is the important one because 52.3. That's abysmal. He hasn't had a mark below 80 the whole season. He had 2 games that were below 100. One of them was against the Chargers. I think it was mostly because he had 20 incompletions, and he threw relatively low for him, which is 302 yards. He usually throws around 350-ish. So the Chargers, he had 90.9, and then against, of course, their loss to the Raiders, he had one of his lowest, his lowest on the year, which was 83.5. Oh, and the Falcons. Sorry, the Falcons was 79.5. So he did get below 80, but that's 79.5. You know what I'm saying? So obviously his worst, I think that's probably the worst Mahomes game, maybe. I mean, yikes. Yikes. So, yeah, he's been under 100 on the season 5 times, under 90 3 times. So, never been below 79.5 on the year. Obviously, here he threw 52.3. That's average of 158.6 yards. He had one fumble, of course. Wow, what do I say? Wow. Well, to be honest, I'm just really shocked. I don't think Mahomes played terribly. I will say the 270 yards are kind of a lie because a lot of those came in the fourth quarter when it was kind of all said and done. To run you through my mind, at first I'm like, all right, they scored first, surprisingly in a touchdown, but it's all right. Once they got the score before the half, like basically the whole first half, I'm like, they're still in the game. They're going to get this win. Once it became 28-6, I was like, okay, I'm getting a little worried. So then I ate my dinner, and I watched the second half. And once the Chiefs hit a field goal, I was like, oh no. And then the Buccaneers marched down, hit a field goal, and I was like, that might be game unless they score a touchdown here. And they didn't. And then it was the fourth quarter, and I was like, yeah, that's it. So, as the biggest Chiefs fan who's not actually a Chiefs fan, I was really upset, but I do still think when it comes to Mahomes and the Chiefs' future, I wholeheartedly fully believe that they'll be back. They're at least going to be in the AFC title next year. Obviously, there's teams that are going to get better in the AFC. I think the Browns, the Ravens, the Bills, maybe even the Dolphins and Colts. Like, you got to watch out for them. So it's definitely going to be difficult, but I do still think Mahomes is probably still the best quarterback in football starting next season. Obviously, last night Brady was the best in the NFL, but I just think in the regular season, I think Mahomes is the best. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. Is he going to be Russell Wilson, where he has that one early Super Bowl and then he can never get back? Or is he going to be Tom Brady? Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be able to be Tom Brady now. That's going to be very difficult. I do still think he has a lot of potential, though. I mean, this is only his fourth season. Really only third. Really only his third. So we will see, but let's move over to the greatest player of all time and an amazing game by him, Thomas Brady, Super Bowl MVP. 21 completions, 29 attempts. They ran the ball a lot, but whenever he did throw, he was incredibly accurate. 6.9 average, so just only 3.3 more than Mahomes. 201 yards, which is actually, that's really odd now that I think about it, 69 less yards than Mahomes. But that really doesn't mean anything because, I mean, like I said, a lot of Mahomes numbers came from, he really only had 120 yards in the game. Then the fourth quarter hit, and he threw a bunch, and of course, the Bucs ran a bunch because they were up by a lot. Tom Brady's quarterback rating was 125.8. Obviously, he had a lot more than Mahomes. That was his highest, well, second highest. Second highest on the season, his highest being the game, of course, at the Lions, where they won 47-7, where he had 158.3 with 348 yards, 22 completions, and 27 attempts. Yeah, that was a crazy game, and 4 touchdowns. Brady threw for 3 touchdowns, and he was only sacked once. He did have 1 fumble. But overall, the game kind of went the way I think some people predicted it. A lot of people thought Brady was going to win. I mean, Mahomes wasn't the risky pick, but people were pretty split on the Super Bowl. I wouldn't say it was disappointing, but it definitely wasn't the affair I expected it to be. I expected it to be a lot closer, but yeah, I get the feeling that Mahomes is going to be really fired up and come back next year and maybe win the big one. But, I mean, Brady's going to be back next year. Maybe we're going to have a repeat Super Bowl. Maybe next year in Los Angeles SoFi Stadium, Super Bowl 56. I think there's a high chance it's a repeat. Like a really high chance. All right. The Chiefs' future, I think I kind of just said it. Just keep building around Mahomes. You've always got him locked up. A 10-year deal, and I do think you have a high chance to win at least 2 more Super Bowls with him. Who knows how many? But I will stand by. I mean, I do think Brady is the GOAT, but it's going to be really hard for Mahomes to hit that level. But I do think Mahomes is still so good. He's amazing. So, all right, we're going to move over to the big trades, part of the quarterback carousel, Stafford to Los Angeles. A part of me thought Los Angeles might make a move, but I really didn't think they'd be ballsy enough, but they did. They went out and got Stafford, and I think this is a genius move for Los Angeles. I think that probably puts them within the top 4 best teams in the NFC. The other 3 would probably be for next year, looking at next year, probably the Bucks and maybe this. Now that I think about it, it probably just makes them one of the top 2 teams. Because, I mean, Rodgers had an amazing year, but I'm not sure how much he'll slow down. And the Saints got to figure out what they're doing at quarterback. I'm guessing they're going with Winston. The Seahawks are good, but Seahawks got to get their stuff together. We'll talk about them more later. But yeah, I think this makes them one of the best teams in the NFC. If I'm Los Angeles, I'm exceptionally happy. You did have to trade some picks. You did get rid of Jared Goff, but obviously that's not a big deal. The Lions looking for quarterbacks. I'm not sure what they're going to do in the draft. I could definitely see them taking Fields if he falls to 7, but I don't know if they'll take Wilson. Maybe I'm just being hopeful because I really, 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 really want the Panthers to take Zach Wilson or trade up and get him. I don't want Fields. I want Wilson. So if Matt Rule's listening, please draft Zach Wilson. And I think that'd be great for the Panthers. Wentz is going to be moved, they said, probably within the next week. I'm thinking Indianapolis. I just think it makes the most sense for everybody involved. The weird thing about Indianapolis is I don't think they thought they'd be this level of good this year. I think they thought they would be like probably a top 10 pick. And then they played really well, and they were like, oh, crap. Well, now what do we do? So I think they should just go out and get Wentz. I mean, they're ready to win now and be try to be a force in the AFC. In the AFC, you got to have a good quarterback, as shown by the best teams being the Chiefs, the Ravens. I would throw the Browns in there, like the Bills. There's a lot of good teams in the AFC. You definitely got to have a big quarterback to combat that. Speaking of AFC quarterbacks, New England, what are they doing? I think there's a really high chance they draft Mac Jones, but I also think there's a really good chance they go out and get Garoppolo. I think, obviously, we've heard before that Belichick wanted to keep Garoppolo to the point that he was willing to trade Brady, which is insane, but I'm saying he obviously believes in Jimmy Garoppolo. The Niners, I think, very well could draft Trey Lance. Yeah, I think they're going to probably draft Mac Jones or snag Garoppolo, and I think the Garoppolo one is infinitely more interesting because he's already been to a Super Bowl with the Niners, and he obviously wasn't the biggest reason they're there, but, I mean, I don't know. That'd be really interesting. It would be really cool if we saw Garoppolo and the Patriots against Brady and the Bucs next year. That'd be sweet, but that's a lot of foresight, and I still think Mahomes is going to come back next year stronger than ever. So, last thing, not last thing, second to last thing, Deshaun Watson I still think is going to the Jets. I don't know why the Texans are prolonging this process. There's a good chance of the Dolphins, but I think when you're the Dolphins, you look at the pros and cons and you're like, well, we could give up the 3 pick and Tua, or we could just draft Devonta Smith, and then they're like, oh, wait, we could do that. And so I think that's what they'll do. Russell Wilson being moved was randomly reported. I don't think he's being moved. If he was, that's crazy, and the NFL has officially hit the point that MLB and NBA have hit where superstars can just do what they want. I mean, the MLB's had that for a while. The NBA really got into it ever since LeBron and Kevin Durant and all those guys just started doing what they wanted. So, I mean, I don't think Wilson is going to be moved, but that would be absolutely insane. Same thing with the Aaron Rodgers thing. I don't think they're going to be moved. If they were, though, that's crazy. But I stand by, not going to happen. That should be everything for the NFL. Congratulations to Tampa Bay. Speaking of Tampa Bay, having the Stanley Cup champions, the Super Bowl champions, and the World Series runner-ups, and the AL champions, I guess is what they'd be. And man, it's a good time to be living in Tampa Bay. That's really impressive. Champa Bay. Champa. Get it? Because they're the champ. Yeah, it's a good joke. Moving over to the NBA, got a lot to talk about. First off, the Lakers do have blue uniforms. I completely forgot when I was ranking my city jerseys. It's the classic jersey. I guess I just hadn't seen it at that time, and they're gorgeous. I'm not a big... I really don't like the Lakers, but I will say they have some of the nicest jerseys in the NBA. Their yellow ones, some of the best, and I think their blue jersey is one of the greatest jerseys in NBA history. Like, I just really wish it was like a not attached to the Lakers, if that makes sense. It doesn't, because it's obviously their jersey, but they're really nice. I really like that blue look, and if you're a person who likes the Lakers, go get the blue jersey, because that's probably better than every other jersey in my opinion. All right, new segment on the podcast. We got the most watchables. So for the NBA, your top 5 most watchables teams. You're sitting down, there's NBA on, and if one of these 5 teams are on, you better watch it. Starting off with number 5. Keep in mind, this isn't the best teams. This isn't me power ranking. No, I'm just saying who's the most interesting to watch, in my opinion. Number 5, I'd say the Rockets. They've went from this all-offense, small ball thing to this weird conglomerate of talent with John Wall and Victor Oladipo and Christian Wood. And I think it's just incredibly odd. And I mean, Christian Wood's, if you've got him on your fantasy basketball team, you're pretty happy. He's solid. He's good, like 17, 22 type of guy. He's good. And, I mean, the Rockets are just interesting because they're so, like, weird. And their defense has went from being, I think it was, like, 28th in the NBA to, like, a top 8. Might be top 5, to be honest. So, Rockets are definitely number 5 most watchable. They're really weird. Number 4 is the Sixers. We'll talk about MVP race more in a bit, but Embiid is definitely one of the top candidates. I still think they missed out on the Harden trade. I think Harden and Embiid would have been the only duo in the NBA that fits as well as LeBron and Davis. I think I've said before, I think Davis and LeBron, out of any NBA duo of that level of talent, like I'm saying, like Stockton Malone, Shaq, Kobe, like 2 superstar level players playing together, I think they're the best fit-wise. I definitely see the argument for Kobe and Shaq being more talented, but I'm saying LeBron and Davis are so, like, they just complement each other perfectly. I don't think there's any better fit possible, but I do think Harden and Embiid would make a strong argument for that, and I think that would be a crazy fun NBA Finals, but that's all over now, so the Sixers sticking with Ben Simmons. But the Sixers are interesting, obviously, because they're doing really well. It's fun to always watch Doc Rivers teams, and there's a high chance that they're in the finals this year, so they're obviously interesting to watch, and they got those nice blue and red uniforms. And I mean, that feeds into the watchability. Number 3, I could put the Hornets. Now that they're starting LaMelo Ball, everybody's taking notice. This is the most culturally relevant I think the Hornets have ever been, probably, maybe since the 90s, but I mean, they got the dope new uniforms where it's like the light blue that I really like, and I mean, they're not going to win every game you watch, but it's just incredibly interesting to see LaMelo on the rise because this is his rookie of the year to lose at this point. I think it's very clear. Like, Halliburton's really good, but it's definitely LaMelo's award right now, and unless something crazy happens, it's his award to lose. So, Hornets are 3rd most watchable team. Number 2, I put the Lakers. I think I shouldn't explain this. They won the NBA championship last year. They're probably the favorites for this year. LeBron and Davis are an amazing duo to watch. I think they're better this year, at least talent-wise. Schroeder's great, fun to watch, and Montrezl Harrell, when he gets, going on defense, he's pretty fun to watch too. So that team's just really fun to watch, really good team. You're seeing one of the greatest basketball players of all time and a top 5. I'd probably put him top 10. I don't know if I'd put him top 5, but he's obviously one of the top players in the NBA, and Anthony Davis. Number 1, we got the Nets. This is for 2 reasons. One, on paper, they're the most talented trio, I think, ever. And I don't think that's really a hot take. I think everybody agrees. And fit-wise, it doesn't really make sense, as I've said before. So it's just incredibly interesting to watch. I was watching their game against the Raptors where KD was out, and Harden was the only like one out of the three on the court, and it was just like, oh, this is this is how they can play, and he was just kind of facilitating and shooting, and then they put Kyrie in, and it was like weird, and so yeah, it's very interesting to just see how they're gonna play the guys together. The Nets got some nice uniforms. They got that nice new gray court. So I mean, the uniforms, the stadium, and all feeds into the watchability rankings. I'll keep up the most watchable top 5 for every podcast, and I'll probably end up doing it for other sports too. But for right now, just NBA because the NFL season obviously just ended. And yeah, so you might be wondering why aren't the Bucks there? Obviously, I'm a big Bucks guy. Cavs aren't there because, well, we'll talk about the Cavs later. But I'm saying the Bucks. I mean, I think you know what to expect of the Bucks. They're really good. It's just really it just comes down to playoffs. You know they're going to make the playoffs. It's just how well will they do once they get to the playoffs. So I think the Nets and the Lakers are interesting because the Lakers are so good, and you got to watch LeBron his last couple of years. And the Nets are weird. The Hornets got LaMelo. The Sixers are just really good, and they haven't been this good, I think, really with like since the early 2000s. And the Rockets are obviously interesting because their entire franchise has shifted. So that's why I chose those 5. Obviously, the NBA All-Star Game is coming up. Maybe I'll do a segment talking about who I think should be in the dunk contest. I might do that on the next one because this one I am going to talk about my personal NBA All-Stars and then who it should legitimately be because those are two very different things. Because personally, if I picked my 5 guys from each conference, for point guard for the East, I'd have Colin Sexton. He's one of my favorite players. He's averaging 23.6 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. So he's doing the assists I feel like could be higher, but he's an amazing scorer, and yeah, I'd love to see him on the All-Star team as a starter. Yes, this is my All-Star team, not the correct one, believe me. Probably a shooting guard, I would put my boy Fred VanVleet. I really like him. He's a good dude, fun player, good guy to watch. So he would be my shooting guard. Moving down to the front court for the East, Embiid, Giannis, and actually we're going to cut Embiid. As much as I love him, I want to put Jeremy Grant and Julius Randle because Julius Randle is actually playing really well for the Knicks. Jeremy Grant just kind of makes me laugh how he's averaging 24 points. He is currently 5th in points for front court guys in the East. He's averaging more points, to put that in perspective, than Domantas Sabonis or Bam Adebayo or Tobias Harris or Chris Middleton. So big names there. And Jeremy Grant's averaging more because he's on the worst team in the NBA. So that's just funny to me. I love you, Embiid. It's just funny. Yeah. So my starters for the East would be Giannis Antetokounmpo, Julius Randle, Jeremy Grant, Colin Sexton, and Fred VanVleet. Moving over to my starters for the West, Luka Doncic, one of my favorite players. He's obviously going to be a starter. And Donovan Mitchell, he's always fun to see. One of the most fun guys in the NBA. You got to put them in there. I am sorry, John Morant, also one of my favorite players, but I'd love to see Donovan. Then for my starters for the front court of the West, it's pretty simple here. I really like Kawhi. Christian Wood, I think, deserves a lot of recognition for how good he is. And the fifth man here is really tough for me. I mean, I like Jokic, but I'm going to give it to Paul George just because a lot of people, including me, were really disappointed in him in the playoffs last year, and it's just kind of funny that he's doing well now. Now for my legitimate All-Stars. If these guys were the All-Stars, I'd be like, that's the perfect team. That's who deserves it. So those are just kind of me being a little goofy, just picking my favorites and guys who I think deserve more recognition. But these are the legitimate starters. Starter, I'm going to go, obviously, Bradley Beal for the East. He's averaging 33 points, and granted, he's on a very, not a very good team, but he's still averaging crazy numbers. I hope he's traded soon. I think the Heat and the Nuggets are the 2 best destinations, but go Bradley. You're doing really well. It's kind of tough here for the other guard. I think Trae Young has a great case with 27 points, 9 assists. But a part of me thinks that Jaylen Brown kind of deserves it. The man's putting up 26 points, 4 assists, and 6 rebounds. Granted, I am rounding up, so if it's like a 0.5, it becomes a 6 rebound because it's actually 5.5 rebounds. So it's really tough here. I think I'll give the look to Trae Young, but I think it's just because Jalen's on the Celtics, so I think it's just more interesting because Trae is on the Hawks, which aren't as very good a team, not as good as a team as the Celtics. The East front court is tough because I have to pick between Giannis, Tatum, Embiid, and Durant. I think deservingly, obviously Embiid and Durant got to be there. It's really just between Giannis and Tatum. Tatum's putting up 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 27 points. Giannis putting up 27.1 points, 6 assists, and 11 rebounds. He's averaging more in everything, and their team have, I think, let me check really quick, borderline the same record. I think the Bucks are currently second in the East, and I think the Celtics are fourth. Yes, the Celtics are fourth. The Bucks are second. It's only separated by 2 wins, but still, I'm going to give the nod to Giannis. So that's what's happening for the East. We have Beal, Trae Young, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant. My starters, legitimate starters for the West. As much as I hate to admit it, Steph Curry probably should be there. He's doing crazy well, and Damian Lillard is doing really well too. So those are simple. I don't hate to admit Damian Lillard doing well. I just don't really like Steph Curry because if you're a Cavs fan, you probably don't like Steph Curry. So those are probably your front 2. Then you've got Jokic, Kawhi, LeBron. I think it's nice and simple. Those are the 3 best guys in the front court. So we got Jokic, Kawhi, LeBron, Curry, and Dame. Now, legitimately, for the votes, currently, if the voting stopped today, and it doesn't, stops on February 11th. Oh, wait, sorry, it doesn't stop on February 11th. That's when the next update is. Today is currently the 8th. So in 3 days, they'll give us a new update, but the update that they gave us on February 4th showed that if the voting stopped on February 4th, it was Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving would be the 2 starting guards for the East, along with KD, Giannis, and Embiid. So I was right in what I said and who I deserved, except I had Kyrie and Trae Young flip. Trae Young is actually 6th with only 368,000 votes. The most votes in the East was Kevin Durant with 2,302,705. The most votes overall was LeBron James with 2,288,676. In terms of most to least, like the top 3 most are LeBron, then KD, then Curry, and then it goes Giannis, and then Embiid. So those are your top 5. Jokic is right behind Embiid, though. Moving over to the West, if this voting ended on February 4th, this is the first update they gave. It would have been Doncic, Curry, LeBron, Jokic, Kawhi. So I think Damian deserves it more than Luka, even though he's one of my favorite players. Because, well, we're going to talk about the Mavericks. Yeah, let's just talk about the Mavericks right now. The Mavericks are 14th in the West. Granted, when you're 14th in the West, you're only 3 wins behind the team in 4th place, the Phoenix Suns. So it's not like you're 14th in the East like the Wizards and you're 5-15. You are 10-14, but they got to get their stuff together. Luka's obviously playing well, but the rest of the team really isn't. The synergy, I don't think, is there. Like, if they're going to become a perennial threat, like I think a lot of people, including me, expected them to take that leap this year to become a threat for the championship, they got to step it up. And granted, we're only a month into the season. A lot of stuff can happen, but it just doesn't. It's not a good look right now. So let's hope the Mavericks get it worked out. I'm rooting for you, Luka. Right now, the Jazz are leading the league with a record of 19-5. Lakers are second with 18-6. This is for the West. Sorry, I didn't mean to say league. Well, they actually are leading the league, so never mind. That worked. For the East, Sixers are obviously number 1. Bucks are 2. Nets are 3. The Sixers have won 17. Bucks have won 15. Nets have won 14. Really surprises here. The Cavs have slowed down. They're now 10th at 10-14 in the East. They're right behind the Raptors and Knicks. I'm starting to get a little scared we're not going to make the playoffs. I think we have a really good chance, especially with the play-in tournament and everything. I think we're definitely a threat in the play-in tournament. When we play a team like the Knicks, we can definitely get by them. But let's hope that happens. I really hope they can win some more games. Maybe get to like a 40, just at least get 500 on the year. We'll be in the play-in, and then hopefully we make the playoff, and then we can get outed by Giannis or Embiid. But I'd love to see the Cavs make the playoffs. It's a big step forward. We don't really need a pick because now that we have Jared Allen, I think we're set at center. A friend of mine brought up that they need to trade Drummond for Bagley and Hield. I did it on a trade machine. The salaries do match. It all works. I would love that if the Kings would be willing to do that. They might not. I feel like that's a lot for Drummond, but it'd be a heck of a move. Maybe you throw in our first, but I don't really want to do that because we're such a young team. But I would love that. That gives us a good 4, and then our starting lineup's kind of set because we've got Sexton, Garland, Okoro, Bagley, and then Jared Allen. And if you want, you can obviously throw Hield over Garland. But the only reason really Hield's there is make the salary work, and the only other guy that's getting paid that much in the Kings is Harrison Barnes. I don't know if the Cavs would really take Harrison Barnes on. Maybe they will, but I feel like that's Drummond. He's a good enough guy, and so he's a good player. He's a borderline all-star. If we played in the NBA in the 2000s, he'd be an all-star. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I do think they're probably going to move him by the deadline. I'd like to see them move him by the deadline and get something out of him, but we will see. Surprises in the East. The Bulls are worse than I thought they'd be. I thought they'd be fringe playoff, but no, they're 11th at 9-13. Obviously, like I said before, we're only a month into the season. A lot can change, but that's not a good look right now. The Heat are 9-14. They have one more loss than the Bulls do. That's weird. Bam's having a really good season, but I think it's really, and Butler's not having a bad season either. I think it's just really a case of I think teams after they got into the bubble and saw how well the Heat were doing, I think a lot of guys sat down in the offseason and figured out what they're going to do to stop them. And I just think it's not really working. It's not flowing as well. They were a team that just really got going at the right time, and it's not going as well now. So I think that's a big part of it. I do think they should try to make a move for Bradley Beal if he becomes available. I think that'd be good for Miami. Surprises. Oh, well, I guess we could kind of put the Hornets as a surprise. I think I put them in my playoffs. I want to say I did. And I'm pretty happy about that. I'm borderline positive they're making the playoff. It feels like the Sixers, Bucks, Nets, Celtics, Pacers, Hawks are all making it. Your really only fringe teams are like the Knicks, Cavs, Hornets, and Raptors. Those are your key fringes. The Heat could obviously overtake the Raptors' fringe spot, but it's starting to feel like the Bulls and Wizards and Pistons are definitely out. Moving over to the West, the Jazz are having a much better record than I think everybody expected at 19-5. But I do think they're kind of just a case of kind of like how the Orlando Magic just caught fire at the beginning of last season randomly. And they were 8-2 or whatever in their first 10 games, but they're a lot better than the Orlando Magic, but when it comes playoff time, the Jazz are going to get beat by the Lakers, I feel like. Donovan's so good, but it really hurts when your second best player averages 17 a game. When your second best player is mostly a defensive guy that doesn't average more than 20, it does hurt your offense. Gobert's really good, but that is a problem. So, the Lakers and the Clippers, the Clippers obviously disappointed last year. I think they've they know that they disappointed, and I think they're really upset about it, so I think they're gonna step up this year. I think they're going to have a lot better playoff, but the Lakers still would probably be my pick to come out of the West. They just look really good. The Warriors, if Curry keeps fighting, he can definitely get them a playoff spot. The Pelicans are kind of surprisingly 12th. I think they could definitely be a team that just starts getting things going, and actually Gobert averages 13 points and 13 rebounds. So it's impressive that he averages 13 in each, but he's not even near 17. So that's rough. I don't think the Jazz are going to be finals favorites. The Spurs are 13-10, which is crazy. I don't think they'll be able to keep that pace up. I think a team like Memphis or New Orleans, heck, even maybe Houston can overtake, and after they lose a couple games because it's the West. The Spurs are 5th at a record of 13-10. The Rockets are 10th at a record of 11-11. So when there's only a 2-game difference in between your 10 and 5 spot, anything can happen. Really, the only teams that are like a lock in my mind are the Nuggets, Suns, Clippers, Lakers. And I guess maybe the Jazz. Probably the Jazz, unless something weird happened. The East is a lot more cut and dry. There's like your top 4, 5-ish teams of the Celtics, Pacers, Nets, Bucks, Sixers, and everybody else. There's your fringes, and then your less likely fringes, and then your bad teams. So that's pretty much the wrap-up on surprises and standings. D. Rose just got traded to the Knicks. Tom Thibodeau has had him on every single team he's coached. When he coached for the Bulls, Rose was there, obviously. When he coached for the T-Wolves, Rose was there. And now he's coaching for the Knicks, and Rose is there. So this is Derrick Rose's second run with the Knicks. I think it's a good move by New York. Definitely trying to make that playoff push. New York's impressed me this season. I didn't want to put them on the watchables list because it's not like the Rockets where it's like a weird fit, but it's interesting. The Knicks are like, oh, you're not amazing, but you're not bad either. So I didn't put them on the watchables list for that reason. They're not really crazy fun basketball or anything. I mentioned Bam Adebayo averaging 20 points. That's really impressive to me. He's definitely one of the best centers in the NBA. I hope the Heat can get their stuff together and make another playoff push. But as a guy who likes the Bucks as my second favorite team, maybe I don't want them to make playoffs because I'm still upset. I'm kidding. I'm kind of kidding, but I'm kind of serious. MVP. We're going to wrap things up by talking about the MVP. It's pretty much a 4-horse race. KD, LeBron, Jokic, Embiid. I think it's going to come down to Embiid and LeBron because I'm guessing those will probably be your top. They will have the top 2 records in their conference. The Sixers will be one of the top 2, and the Lakers will be one of the top 2. I think LeBron's probably got the best odds just because he was really, people thought he might win it last year. I thought Giannis definitely deserved it more, and that's not just me being biased towards Giannis. I think people got bored of the fact that Giannis had ran away with it, so then they just started trying to make LeBron. I'm like, well, if LeBron was playing this way the whole season, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Basically, point is, I think it comes down to Embiid, LeBron, and it's really going to come down to when they play. Like when the Lakers and Sixers play, everybody tune in because those are big games. There's a high chance that that's the NBA Finals. I'm not sold on the Sixers being in the Finals. I think they kind of feel like a regular season team. Right now, I'm not completely sold. That's why I put them in the watchables because there's a high chance to make the Finals, but a part of me doesn't want to bet against the Nets and the Bucks and the Celtics. I just feel like when it comes down to winning playoff games, the Celtics and the Nets I trust more, and the Bucks got Giannis, and I think he's obviously angry. So he's got a good, kind of like the Clippers, where he's got a good chance to just blow up in the playoffs because he wants to prove everybody wrong. And I think Drew Holiday can definitely be a big part of that. I'm really glad they kept Dante DiVincenzo because I think he could be a good scorer in the playoffs for them. Back to MVP. Oh, wait. Quick side note. I love the new schedule, how they'd go back-to-back. I'd like to see that stay. I think it's great because it makes every game feel more important. Like, when the Cavs were playing the Nets and they beat them the first night, I was like, okay, if we beat them both nights, that's a big deal. And it just ends up, we ended up losing the next game, but it just ends up feeling like every game feels like it has more meaning now because it's like you don't want to go 0-2, you don't want to get swept when you go over there. It makes it kind of have a more playoff vibe. You don't get like those fluke wins because it'll be like, oh, how did the Bulls beat the Sixers? Okay. I don't think the Bulls didn't beat the Sixers, but I'm just giving the example. How did the Bulls beat the Sixers? And then they beat them again, and you're like, wow, okay, the Bulls are better than we thought. Or the Sixers beat the Tar the next night, and you're like, okay, fluke win. Like, it's very interesting that way. I think it's more fun to watch. I hope they keep it that way. And also, side note, if the Bulls were trading Zach LaVine, I think the Sixers should definitely try to get him. I think he'd be great with the Sixers system. But granted, the Sixers got a good thing going right now. Maybe I'm just being pushing it too far. Maybe they should just stick with what's working. MVP, though, Jokic is having an amazing season, obviously. KD, I think, is 2. But I think what will hurt KD is that when you look at his roster and he's got MVP Harden and Kyrie's one of the best point guards in the NBA, I think that feeds into it a little bit. It really shouldn't. I think if it's MVP is a combination of storyline, because that's always important. It's always what ends up being important is like the story of how you got there. Record, you got to be one of the best records in the NBA, obviously. Stats, and then just performance. Like when people tune in to watch you, what are you doing? I think KD's kind of having that thing where like he's been out a couple games with COVID, and I think that'll hurt him. Whereas LeBron and Embiid's playing the most he's ever played in his career, and right now I'm not sure who my MVP is. I think the Lakers are the best team in basketball, so I feel like LeBron. It's probably LeBron's award to lose, but Embiid's right there. So it'll be very interesting, unless the narrative of, hey, he's got Anthony Davis, but I'm not sure if that'll become a narrative or not. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's definitely a close race, and we'll have to stay tuned for that. After NBA, there's really not a lot to talk about. Trevor Bauer obviously went to the Dodgers, and we all know I'm upset about that because I don't like the Dodgers, and I wish he would have went to the Mets or the Padres. But that's all for now. See you all in the next one.